There are moments in life when destiny reveals itself not in grand gestures, but in a single act of courage. When the rancher saw that young woman tied to the riverbank, with the alligators silently approaching, he didn't think about consequences or dangers. He just acted. And in that rescue, 2 lives that were believed lost found their way back home. This is the story of how care transforms wounds into hope, and how true love emerges when the soul finally allows itself to trust. Subscribe to the channel for heartwarming stories every day. The wooden house creaking in the wind was the only sound accompanying Miguel in the cold pre-dawn hours on the plateau. He always woke before the sun, started a fire in the wood-burning stove, and brewed black coffee, strong, the way he'd learned from his father. Smoke rose slowly from the chimney as the grey morning light began to bathe the fields of tall grass stretching as far as the eye could see. It had been 3 years since Anna had left, 3 years since the fever had taken her one harsh winter night, leaving Miguel alone in a house that once echoed with laughter and plans. He didn't talk about it. There was no one to listen anyway. The ranch was nearly 2 hours from town, connected by a dirt road that turned to mud during the rainy months. He worked it alone, mending fences, tending to the dairy cows, planting corn and beans for sustenance. His calloused hands knew every plank of the house, every stone of the creek that cut through the land. There was a comforting routine in that solitude, a predictability that shielded his heart from new pains. On that September morning, the cold still bit at his fingers as Miguel grabbed the milking pail and walked to the barn. Dew covered the grass like a crystal blanket. He liked this hour. The world hadn't fully woken yet, and everything seemed suspended between night and day. But today, there was something different in the air. A heavier silence. The cows were restless, milling about the corral. Miguel frowned, set the pail down, and looked around. The river. That's where the strange feeling was coming from. He followed the narrow trail leading to the bank, stepping on dry leaves that crunched under his boots. Mist hung low over the dark water. It was then that his heart stopped. There was a figure tied to an old log leaning over the river. A young woman. Her arms were bound with thick ropes, her soaked dress clinging to her thin body. And in the shallow water, moving with that terrifying slowness that precedes an attack, 2 alligators were gliding towards her. The world exploded into motion. Miguel didn't think. He ran to the bank, waded into the knee-deep cold water, yelled, and struck the surface with a dry branch. The alligators backed off, wary, but didn't flee. He advanced further, placing his body between the animals and the young woman, and finally managed to untie the ropes binding her. She collapsed into his arms, unconscious, or nearly so. He carried her out of the water, feeling the too light weight of that exhausted body. His heart pounded so hard it felt like it was trying to escape his chest. "Hold on," he whispered, more to himself than to her. "Hold on." Back at the house, he laid her down near the stove, covered her with the thick wool blanket Anna had woven, and rushed to get hot water. His hands trembled as he soaked a cloth and cleaned the young woman's pale face, wiping away the mud and leaves stuck to her dark hair. She was young, perhaps in her early 20s. Her face had delicate, almost childlike features, but there was a line of suffering around her mouth. On her wrists, purple marks from the ropes. Miguel felt anger rise like bile in his throat. Who would do this, and why? The young woman's eyes suddenly opened, brown, scared, like those of a cornered animal. She tried to pull away, but she was too weak. "Easy," Miguel said, keeping his voice low. "You're safe. No one's going to hurt you here." She stared at him, trembling, trying to process where she was. Tears began to fall, silent, and she squeezed her eyes shut as if wishing she could disappear. Miguel said nothing more. He just sat there on the cold floor, at a respectful distance, while the fire crackled and the coffee sat forgotten on the stove. Sometimes words don't matter. Sometimes just being present is enough. The silence inside the house was different from any other Miguel had ever experienced. It wasn't the familiar silence of living alone, but something charged, heavy, full of unasked questions. The young woman remained huddled near the stove for hours, just watching the flames with a vacant stare. Miguel prepared a simple soup, potatoes, carrots, a bone with a little meat. He wasn't a great cook, but he knew the basics, those things that warm the body when it's colder inside than out. He served the broth in a clay bowl and placed it within the young woman's reach, without pushing. "It's hot," he said simply. "Eat it slow." She looked at the bowl as if unsure what to do. Then, slowly, she picked up the spoon with fingers that still trembled and brought a little to her mouth. She closed her eyes. A tear trickled down. It wasn't just hunger that soup was satisfying. Miguel returned to his outdoor tasks, giving her space. He fixed the hinge on the chicken coop door, gathered firewood for the night, but his mind wouldn't stop. Who was she? Why would someone leave her to die like that? When he returned, at dusk, the bowl was empty and clean. The young woman had curled up in the blanket and was sleeping soundly, her face finally relaxed. Miguel lit the lantern, made his own dinner, and ate in silence, sitting at the wooden table he'd built himself years ago. That night, he set up a makeshift bed for himself in the back room, more of a storage space than a bedroom, and left the main room for her. It was the right thing to do. On the second day, she finally spoke. "Thank you." Her voice was hoarse, low, as if unused for a long time. Miguel was feeding the chickens in the yard. He turned and saw her standing in the doorway, still wrapped in the blanket, her bare feet on the threshold. "No need to thank me," he replied. "I did what anyone would do." "No," she shook her head slowly. "Not anyone. Most would have passed by." He didn't know what to say to that. So he asked, "What's your name?" "Clara," she said after a pause. "My name is Clara." "Miguel." He pointed to himself. "Want some coffee? I have yesterday's bread." She nodded, and for the first time Miguel saw what might be the beginning of a smile. They ate in silence, but it was a different silence now, a silence that didn't weigh so heavily. Clara looked around the house, simple, clean, with few furnishings, but everything well cared for. There was a small photograph on a shelf, Miguel and a smiling woman. "Your wife?" Clara asked softly. "She was," Miguel replied, his voice firm. "Passed away 3 years ago." "I'm so sorry." "Me too." Clara lowered her eyes to her coffee mug, then her voice even weaker. "I have nowhere to go." Miguel stopped chewing. He looked at her, that fragile creature fate had placed in his path. He could see the fear, the shame, the uncertainty. "Then stay," he said simply, "until you decide what you want to do. I have food. I have space you won't want for anything here." Clara's eyes filled with tears again, but this time there was something different in them. Something that could be hope. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "You don't even know me." Miguel was silent for a moment, choosing his words. "Because someone tied you to that river to die," he said, his voice low but firm. "And I believe that when God puts someone in our path like that, it's not for us to turn our backs." Clara nodded, wiping tears with the damp sleeve of her dress. "I'll get some of Anna's clothes for you." Miguel stood up. "They should fit. And then you rest more. Tomorrow, if you want, help me with the eggs. The chickens don't bite." For the first time since she'd woken up, Clara truly smiled. It was a small, scared, but real smile. "Thank you, Miguel." "You're welcome, Clara." Clara's first days on the farm were marked by a careful dance of distance. She helped where she could, gathering eggs, sweeping the yard, washing clothes in the stone sink behind the house. But her movements were tentative, as if she expected someone to yell at her or send her away at any moment. Miguel watched from a distance, not pressing. He recognized that kind of fear, not the fear of a moment, but the fear that takes root deep after years of small cruelties. One afternoon, while he was fixing the chicken coop roof, he saw her standing near the fence that led to the road. She was looking at the horizon with an expression he knew well, the look of someone expecting something bad to come from that direction. "Are you afraid of someone?" Miguel asked, climbing down from the ladder. Clara started, not having heard him approach. She hugged herself tighter. "The town," she began, her voice hesitant. "If they find out I'm here, what will they do?" Miguel kept his tone calm. "This is my land. No one enters here without my permission." But Clara shook her head. "You don't understand. There are people in town who don't want me to say certain things." Miguel waited. He had learned not to rush confessions. "I used to work for the Tavares family," Clara finally said, the words coming out slowly, painfully. "For old Mr. Tavares, before he passed, he was good to me, but his sons, they wanted something he didn't leave them. Land, a will, and I overheard things, saw documents. And they wanted to silence you," Miguel finished, his jaw tight. "The oldest son's wife accused me of theft in front of everyone in the town square." Clara's voice trembled. "Said I'd stolen a ring from her, put it in my bag. I tried to explain, but no one believed me. They said I was too innocent to be smart, that it must have been the devil using me." Miguel felt the familiar anger rise. He knew the Tavares well. A wealthy family in town, owners of half the land around. The kind of people who thought the world owed them obedience. "And the night by the river?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "Two hooded men grabbed me when I was leaving church." Clara clutched herself tighter. "They took me there. Said liars like me deserved a liar's end. They tied me up and left." The silence that followed was dense as lead. "You're not going back there," Miguel said, and there was a finality to those words. "Not while I'm alive." Clara looked at him, her eyes wide. "But the farm, your name. If they find out you're hiding me, let them find out," he cut in firm. "I'm not a man to bend to rich folks' pressure, and you didn't do anything wrong." "How can you be so sure?" "Because those who do wrong don't have eyes like yours," Miguel said simply. "Now come on, I'll teach you to milk. Cows are better company than people." Clara let out something that was half laugh, half sob. She followed him to the barn, and for the first time since she'd arrived, her shoulders seemed to relax a little. But that night, when Miguel was almost asleep, he heard muffled crying coming from the next room. He lay in the dark, his fists clenched, fighting the urge to go to her. It wasn't appropriate, it wasn't his place. But when the crying turned into a low moan of a nightmare, he couldn't stay still any longer. He knocked softly on the door. "Clara, are you okay?" Silence, then. "I dreamed of the water, of the alligators. Can I come in?" "You can." He opened the door. She was sitting on the bed, hugging her knees, trembling. Miguel lit the low lamp and pulled up a chair. "My mother used to sing when I had nightmares," he said, without thinking much. "I don't sing well, but I can stay here until you fall asleep again." Clara looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. Miguel stayed there, in the hard chair, as she slowly lay back down. He began to hum softly, an old lullaby he hadn't heard in decades. His voice was deep, off-key, but sincere. Eventually, Clara's breathing calmed. She slept. Miguel waited another half-hour before leaving. Just to be sure, when he finally returned to his room, he looked at the dark ceiling and whispered a prayer he hadn't said in years. "Lord, I don't know why you brought her to me, but since she's here, give me the strength to protect her as she deserves. Amen." The days began to take on a new texture. Clara woke early, helping Miguel with breakfast. She had learned to make the bread he liked, dense with a crisp crust. They ate together, speaking little but comfortable in the shared silence. The farm's routine gradually transformed into a dance of two. Miguel fixed what was broken. Clara organized what was lost. She discovered an abandoned garden patch behind the house and began to clear it, pulling weeds, turning the soil with an old hoe. Anna used to plant here, Miguel commented one day, watching her work. She had a knack for it. I could never make anything grow right. Let me try, Clara said, wiping sweat from her brow. My grandmother taught me. She said plants are like people. They need attention and someone to believe in them. She planted lettuce, tomatoes, parsley. She watered them every morning, whispering to the seedlings when she thought no one was looking. Miguel watched from the window, a small smile playing on his lips. In the afternoons, Clara mended clothes. Miguel had a pile of shirts with missing buttons, pants with tears. She sewed, with small, precise stitches humming softly. There was something meditative about it, something that soothed the restless parts of his soul. One day, Miguel brought a bolt of light blue fabric from town. Thought you might like this, he said, a little awkwardly, for a new dress. Anna's is getting worn out. Clara took the fabric with reverence, her fingers gliding over the smooth texture. It's beautiful, she whispered. You didn't have to. I know, but I wanted to. She looked at him, and something passed between them, a silent understanding, a connection that went beyond words. That evening after supper, Miguel took an old leather-bound book from the shelf. Can you read? He asked. A little, Clara replied. Mrs. Tavares taught me when I was a girl, said it was a shame for me not to know. I can read to you, Miguel offered, if you like. It's a storybook my father used to read to me. Clara smiled. I'd like that. They settled near the fire, Miguel in his armchair, Clara in a nearby chair, curled in a blanket. He began to read in his deep voice, occasionally stumbling over difficult words. It was a story about a knight and a dragon, about courage and loyalty. Clara closed her eyes, letting the words wash over her. It had been years since anyone had done something just for her, expecting nothing in return. The feeling was overwhelming. By the time Miguel finished the chapter, she was nearly asleep. He closed the book gently. Clara? Are you happy here? She opened her eyes, looked at him, really looked, seeing the good man beneath the rough exterior. Happier than I've ever been anywhere, she answered with raw honesty. Miguel nodded, something settling within him. Then stay as long as you want. This can be your home too. The weeks passed. The garden began to sprout, small green shoots pushing through the soil. Clara sang more now, her soft voice filling the empty corners of the house. Miguel found himself smiling for no reason, whistling as he worked. One morning, he found her standing by the fence, watching the sunrise. The sky was painted in shades of pink and gold, the cool air still carrying the scent of dew. It's beautiful, she said. Different every day. Miguel stood beside her, their shoulders almost touching. Anna used to say, every sunrise is a gift, he said, a chance to start over. Do you believe that? I'm starting to believe it again, he admitted. Clara looked at him, and her heart gave a little leap. Something was shifting between them, something she wasn't sure she had a right to feel. She was just a woman he'd saved, an obligation, a charity. But when Miguel smiled at her, that rare, genuine smile that lit up his whole face, she allowed herself, just for a moment, to imagine it could be something more. The first sign of trouble came on a blustery afternoon when Miguel went into town for supplies. Clara stayed as usual, preferring not to risk being seen. She was in the garden when she heard the sound of hooves on the road. Her heart leapt. She dropped her trowel and scrambled inside the house, bolting the door, her chest tight. Through a crack in the window, she saw two riders pull up to the gate. She couldn't see their faces from this distance, but fear paralyzed her. They looked around, spoke to each other, then rode away. But the message was clear. Someone knew she was here. When Miguel returned, he found Clara huddled in the corner of the kitchen, knees pulled to her chest. "They came here," she said, her voice trembling. "Two men. They just looked." Miguel dropped the supplies and knelt beside her. "Did they see you?" "I don't think so. But they know, Miguel. They're looking." "Then let them look," he said, his voice firm. "This house has doors and windows, and I've got a shotgun. I don't want you to get hurt because of me." Clara clutched his arm. "You've done enough. I can leave." "Disappear." "You're not going anywhere," Miguel interrupted. "Listen here, Clara. You're not alone in this, you understand? Not alone." She met his gaze, her eyes brimming with tears, and nodded slowly. That night, the storm hit. Not just the storm of wind and rain that lashed the windows and made the house groan, but the storm Clara had been holding inside herself. She started coughing during supper, a dry, persistent cough. Miguel frowned. "How long have you been like this?" "A few days," she admitted. "Thought it would pass." But it hadn't. At midnight, Miguel woke to the sound of low moans. He went to Clara's room and found her burning with fever, shivering under every blanket he'd piled on her. "Clara." He touched her forehead. It was scorching. "Hold on, I'll get some water." He worked through the night, cool cloths on her forehead, herbal tea his mother had taught him to make, blankets when she shivered, uncovering her when the heat became unbearable. He didn't sleep, didn't rest, just stayed there watching, adjusting, tending. Sometime in the pre-dawn hours, Clara's eyes fluttered open, disoriented by the fever. "Mama," she whispered. "No, it's me, Miguel. You're sick, but you're going to be okay." "I'm cold." He covered her better, rubbed her icy hands between his until they began to warm. When she started to cry, softly, weeping for things she couldn't even name in the confusion of her fever, he sat on the edge of the bed and held her hand. "I'm here," he said. "You're not alone. I'm here." By dawn, the fever broke. Clara slept deeply for the first time in hours. Miguel finally allowed himself to close his eyes, slumping in the chair beside the bed, still holding her hand. When Clara woke, it was late morning. Sunlight streamed through the window, soft. Miguel was in the chair, his head lolled to one side, asleep on his feet. There were deep shadows under his eyes, and his hand still held hers, even in sleep. Clara felt something stir in her chest, an emotion so potent it almost ached. No one had ever cared for her like this. No one had ever stayed. She squeezed his hand gently. Miguel woke with a start. "You better?" was the first thing he asked. "I am," she replied, her voice hoarse but firm. "Thanks to you. Just did what needed doing." "No." Clara shook her head slowly. "You did more than that, more than anyone would." Miguel didn't know how to respond. He just squeezed her hand back, a silent understanding passing between them. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving everything clean and fresh. The fields glistened from the night's rain, and the sky was an impossible blue. But within that simple house, something new had been born. A bond forged in care and vulnerability, stronger than either of them could have imagined. Clara recovered in the following days, but something had changed. She could no longer ignore what she felt when she looked at Miguel. The way her heart raced when he entered the room, how she looked for any excuse to be near him. And there was guilt, too. The suffocating feeling that she was bringing trouble to the only person who had been good to her. Miguel deserved peace, not the ghosts that haunted her. One afternoon, while he was out in the fields, Clara made up her mind. She couldn't live in that house anymore, accepting his kindness, without him knowing the whole truth. When Miguel returned, he found her sitting at the table, hands clasped, her face pale. "I need to tell you something," she said before he could speak. "The whole truth." Miguel sat down slowly, waiting. "Old man Tavares," Clara began, her voice trembling. "He raised me since I was a little girl. My mother worked in his house until she died of tuberculosis when I was 7. He was kind, treated me almost like a granddaughter, taught me to read, gave me clothes, food." She paused, taking a deep breath. "But his sons, Anthony and Rodney, they always looked at me differently, like I was an intruder. When Mr. Tavares got sick, he called me one night. He was very weak, and he told me a secret." Miguel remained still, listening intently. "He had another daughter," Clara continued, the words tumbling out now. "A daughter from a youthful relationship, before he married. Her name was Isabel. He never publicly acknowledged her due to family pressure, but he never forgot her. He left half his land to her in a new will, sealed, kept with the priest." "And his sons found out," Miguel said. "They found out I knew," Clara corrected. "The night before he died, Anthony came into the room. I was there. He saw the old man giving me an envelope, making me promise to take it to the priest when he was gone. Anthony smiled, said it was fine, but it wasn't." She wiped away tears that began to fall. "After the funeral, they started. First, it was subtle. They said I was stealing food, that I was ungrateful, that Mr. Tavares only tolerated me out of pity. Then came the accusation about the ring. Public humiliation. And when they thought I might still speak up, when they knew I'd told the blacksmith's wife about the will, that's when they took me to the river." Miguel felt a hot anger surge through him. "The envelope. Did you deliver it?" Clara shook her head. "I couldn't. They burned my little house, took everything. But I memorized the daughter's name. Isabel Ferreira. And I know she lives 2 towns north. The priest knows the truth too, but he's afraid of the Tavares family." "Then we'll talk to him," Miguel said, standing up. "And you'll go to this Isabel. I'll take you." "No!" Clara stood up too. "You don't understand. If the Tavares find out you're helping me, they'll destroy you too. They have power, money, influence, and I have the truth." Miguel interrupted her. "And I have you, and that's enough. Miguel, Clara." He took her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. "Since Anna died, I've lived without purpose, just existing, passing the days. But when I found you in that river, something woke up in me. I won't let them hurt you again, not while there's breath in my lungs." Clara covered her face with her hands, sobbing. "I don't deserve so much kindness." "You do," he said, soft but firm. "God doesn't put good people in our path by accident, Clara. And you are good, the purest I've ever known." She let him hug her, let his strength envelop her. And for the first time since she was a child, Clara allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could work out. But that night, while Miguel slept, Clara lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She had put him in danger. The truth was out, and the Tavares wouldn't rest until they destroyed her, and anyone who stood in their way. She had to protect him, even if it meant leaving. Morning arrived heavy, laden with unspoken threats. Miguel woke to the sound of hooves, many hooves. He dressed quickly and stepped outside, closing the door behind him. 5 men on horseback were at the gate. Anthony Tavares in front, dressed as always in expensive clothes, his face arrogant under a wide-brimmed hat. Beside him, an older man with a badge on his chest, the town sheriff. "Good morning, Miguel," Anthony said, his voice syrupy. "Sorry to bother you." "What do you want?" Miguel kept his voice steady. "We're looking for a fugitive," the sheriff replied. "A woman named Clara, accused of theft. We have reason to believe she might be hiding here." "I don't know any Clara," Miguel lied without hesitation. Anthony smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. I heard in town you bought blue fabric last week. Curious. A man alone buying dress material. My purchases are none of your business. They are when you're harboring a criminal, Anthony retorted, his tone hardening. I can sue you for complicity, you know. Ruin your reputation, take your land for fabricated debts. I have influential friends. Miguel took a step forward. This is my property, and you don't enter here without a warrant, so I suggest you head back to town before I lose my patience. The sheriff exchanged a look with Anthony, clearly uncomfortable. Miguel, be sensible. I am being, Miguel interrupted. You have 3 seconds to leave. 1. You'll regret this. Anthony spat the words. 2. The men backed away, turning their horses. But Anthony paused, looking back. She's a liar, Miguel. She'll destroy you like she tried to destroy my family. When you realize your mistake, it'll be too late. 3. They rode off, dust kicking up under their hooves. Miguel stood there until they disappeared around the bend in the road. Then his legs gave out, and he had to lean against the gate. Inside the house, Clara had heard everything through the crack in the window. When Miguel entered, she was packing her few possessions into the blue fabric he had given her. "What are you doing?" he asked, though he already knew. "I have to go, Miguel," she said, her voice breaking. "You saw what they're willing to do. They'll destroy you because of me. Let them try." "No." She turned to him, her eyes red. "You don't understand. They'll bribe the judge, they'll invent debts. They'll do whatever it takes. You'll lose everything, and I can't. I can't live with that on my conscience." Miguel crossed the room and took her arms. "Clara, listen to me. I've already lost everything once when Anna died. The farm, the house, none of it matters if it means losing you too." "It does matter," she sobbed. "This is your life, your story. I'm just someone you saved." "An obligation?" "You are not an obligation," Miguel practically shouted, and they both startled at the intensity. He took a deep breath, softening his voice. "You are not an obligation, Clara. You are the first thing in 3 years that makes me want to wake up in the morning. That makes me smile. That makes me feel there's still goodness in the world." Clara stared at him, tears rolling freely now. "Miguel, I can't ask you to sacrifice everything for me. You're not asking, I'm offering." He wiped the tears from her face with his thumb. "And there's a way to fix this. A way to protect you and face the Tavares head on." "How?" "Marry me." The silence that followed was absolute. Clara blinked, certain she had misunderstood. "What?" "Marry me," Miguel repeated, firm. "If you're my wife, legally, officially, no one can tear you away from here. And together we'll go to Isabel, tell the truth to the priest, to the judge if we have to. We'll do justice the right way." "But you don't." "We don't." Clara could barely form sentences. "You barely know me." "I know enough," he said. "I know your kindness, your courage, your pure heart. And I know I'd rather face any storm with you than live another day alone in this empty house." "Miguel." She was speechless. "You don't have to decide now." He released her hands, giving her space. "But think about it. It's a way out. And who knows? Who knows, it could become something more. With time." Clara sat down heavily in the chair, her mind spinning. It was crazy. But looking at Miguel, this man who had risked everything for a stranger, who had cared for her when she was sick, who had defended her against powerful men, she knew there was no one more honorable in the world. "Yes," she whispered. "What?" "Yes," she repeated, louder, looking at him. "I'll marry you." The decision was made, but executing it was another story. Miguel and Clara needed respectable witnesses, someone who could perform the ceremony without the Tavares interfering prematurely. The next day, before dawn, they rode out together, Clara on the gentle mare Miguel kept for short trips. They went first to the priest's house in the neighboring village, Father Martin's, an elderly man who knew old Tavares. The priest received them with surprise, but when Miguel explained the situation, his eyes filled with tears. "I knew this day would come," he said heavily. "Old Tavares told me about Isabel before he died. Made me promise I'd protect the truth. But I'm old, Miguel. I'm afraid of what his sons might do." "Then help us now," Clara implored. "Marry us, witness that I'm not a criminal, help Isabel get what's rightfully hers." The priest looked at her, this young woman with clear eyes and a transparent heart. Then he nodded. "I'll marry you today," he said, "and I'll write a letter to the judge in the capital, telling him everything I know. But you need to go to Isabel. She's the only one who can legally claim the inheritance. They married right there, in the simple chapel, with only the priest and his housekeeper as witnesses. Miguel didn't have a ring, so he took a silver coin his father had given him and placed it in Clara's hand as a symbol. "I, Miguel Santos, take you, Clara, as my wife," he said, his voice firm. "I promise to protect you, to care for you, and to honor you every day God gives me." Clara, her voice trembling, replied, "I, Clara, take you, Miguel, as my husband. I promise to respect you, to support you, and to stand by your side through any storm." When the priest declared them husband and wife, Clara felt something settle within her, a sense of belonging she had never experienced. From the priest's, they went straight north, riding for hours, until they reached the village where Isabel lived. Finding her was easier than they expected. Everyone knew Isabel Ferreira, the respected midwife who lived in a modest house by the river. When she opened the door and saw Clara, her eyes, the same soft brown as old Tavares's, widened. "You're the girl who took care of Papa," she said, moved. "And you're Isabel," Clara replied. "His daughter. He asked me to find you." Inside the house, Clara told her everything. Isabel cried, alternating between pain and anger, and finally something that might be hope. "I always knew he hadn't forgotten me," she said. "But I never thought he'd have the courage to leave me anything." "And he did," Miguel said. "Half the land. It's in the will the priest has." "But the brothers—" Isabel shook her head. "They'll fight. They'll destroy you." "Then we fight back," Clara said with a new firmness, "but the right way, with truth, with witnesses, with justice." Isabel looked at that young woman, fragile in appearance but iron within. Then she nodded. "I'll claim what's mine," she said, "and you will witness." They returned to the ranch 3 days later with Isabel and the priest. They also brought the blacksmith and his wife, those to whom Clara had told about the will. They brought the doctor who had attended old Tavares and could confirm his sanity. They brought documents, letters, proof. It was a small army of truth. At the ranch, they found a surprise. Antonio Tavares was there with the sheriff and 2 deputies. They had an eviction order, claiming Miguel owed money. An obvious lie. But when they saw Isabel, when they saw the priest, when Miguel presented the marriage certificate and Clara introduced herself as his legitimate wife, Antonio's expression shifted from arrogance to something close to panic. "This won't work," he spat. "No judge will believe you against me." "Perhaps not," the priest said, stepping forward. "But the bishop will, and I've already sent a detailed letter to him about the will, about the attempted murder, about everything." Antonio paled. "And I," Isabel said, lifting her chin, "will go to the judge in the capital tomorrow, with witnesses, with proof, and I will claim what my father left me." The sheriff, seeing the tide turn, took a step back. "Mr. Tavares, I think we should leave. This is above my pay grade." Antonio looked around, at the determined faces, at the truth finally coming to light. Then he spat on the ground and left, knowing the battle, at least this one, was lost. As the horses disappeared in the distance, Clara collapsed into Miguel's arms, trembling with relief and exhaustion. "It's over," she whispered. "Is it really over?" "Not yet," Miguel said, holding her tight. "But we're winning, and we'll win until the end, together." The following week was a whirlwind. Isabel, with Clara and Miguel by her side, went to the capital to present her claim. The judge, a serious middle-aged man, listened to the case with growing attention. The Tavareses had sent their own lawyers, men in expensive suits who tried to discredit Clara as a witness. They called her an opportunist, a liar, a woman of questionable morals. It was Miguel who stood up, uninvited, interrupting the lawyer mid-sentence during a particularly cruel accusation. "With all due respect, Your Honor," he said, his voice firm, "this woman they're trying to destroy is my wife, and I swear by everything sacred that she is the most upright person I've ever known. If character were gold, she'd be richer than all the Tavareses combined." The judge banged his gavel. "Order! Mr. Santos, please sit down." "Not before I say one thing," Miguel continued. "I found my wife tied up by a riverbank, left for dead like an animal, because she knew the truth. If that doesn't speak to who the real criminals are here, I don't know what does." The silence in the courtroom was absolute. The judge looked at Clara, her face pale but determined, her clear eyes meeting every accusation without flinching. "The witness may speak," he said finally, gesturing to Clara. She rose, her legs trembling, but as she began to tell her story, from her childhood in the Tavares household, the old man's last words, the attempt to silence her, her voice grew steadier. She spoke not with anger or vengeance, but with simple, devastating truth. When she finished, the priest stood and presented the sealed will he had kept safe all those months. The judge opened it, read it, and his face hardened. "This will is valid and legal," he declared, "and the attempt to suppress it constitutes a serious crime. I'm ordering a full investigation into the actions of Antonio and Rodrigo Tavares, including allegations of attempted murder." Antonio leaped to his feet. "This is absurd. There's no proof." "The rope marks on Mrs. Santos's wrists are proof enough to start with," the judge cut in, "along with testimony from multiple reputable sources. Officers, arrest this man." Chaos erupted. Rodrigo tried to flee, but was restrained. Antonio shouted about injustice and conspiracy as he was led away. Isabel wept silently, years of pain finally validated. Clara felt her legs give out. Miguel caught her before she fell, holding her close. "You did it," he whispered in her ear. "You were so brave." Outside the courthouse, a small crowd had gathered. News travels fast, especially when it involves the downfall of a powerful family. But among the faces, Clara saw some that made her pause. The blacksmith's wife, smiling and waving. The doctor, nodding with respect. Even some of the town women who had once looked at her with disdain now watched her with something different, perhaps admiration, perhaps shame for having doubted. "Clara!" Isabel came running, hugging her tightly. "Thank you. Thank you for not giving up, for being brave when I couldn't be." "You were always brave," Clara replied. "You just needed the chance to show it." That night, back at the farm, Clara and Miguel sat on the porch. The sky was a canopy of stars, the warm air carrying the scent of earth and the distant chirp of crickets. "What happens now?" Clara asked softly. "Now?" Miguel considered. "Now we live, we tend the farm, we plant the garden, we read books at night, live the way we were supposed to all along, in peace." "And us?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. We got married out of necessity. You don't have to—" Miguel turned to her, taking her hand. "Clara, listen to me. I married you to protect you, that's true. But if that were all, I would have sent you away once the danger passed. What I feel for you—" He paused, choosing his words. "It's something I haven't felt in years, something I thought had died with Anna. And no, it's not the same. It's different, But it's real. And if you give me a chance, a real chance, I'll spend the rest of my life showing you how much you mean to me." Clara felt tears fall. But they were different tears now, tears of relief, of joy, of something that dared to resemble happiness. "I feel it too," she confessed, "since the first night when you sat by my chair until I slept. Since every gesture of care, every kind word. Miguel, you saved me in more ways than just by that river." He pulled her into an embrace, and they stood like that for a long time, under the stars, two survivors of different storms, finally finding safe harbor in each other. 6 months later, the farm had transformed. The garden Clara planted was bursting with life: red tomatoes, crisp lettuce, fragrant herbs. She had expanded, fencing a larger area, and now sold the surplus at the town market every week. The women who had once scorned her now sought her out for planting advice, and Clara gave it generously. Miguel had renovated the house. He'd painted the exterior walls white, fixed the roof completely, built a larger porch where they sat every evening. The property wasn't rich, but it was prosperous in the ways that mattered, abundant, warm, full of life. Isabel visited once a month, bringing news of how she was managing her share of the inheritance. She had opened a school for poor girls in the town, funded by the land's income. "It's what Dad would have wanted," she always said. The Tavareses had been convicted. Antonio to 3 years in prison, Rodrigo to 2. The family had lost much of its influence. Some said it was divine justice. Others just shook their heads, remembering how quick they had been to judge Clara. But Clara held no grudges. She had learned that bitterness was a weight that only the carrier suffered. When she encountered someone who had scorned her, she simply smiled and moved on. One spring morning, Miguel woke to a sound he hadn't heard in years, the sound of Clara singing in the kitchen while she made coffee. It wasn't just humming, but real singing, with uninhibited joy. He dressed and went downstairs, finding her standing by the stove, her hair in a loose bun, wearing one of the dresses she'd sewn herself, from the blue fabric he'd bought months ago. "Good morning," she said, smiling when she saw him. "Coffee's almost ready." Miguel wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "You're happy," he observed. "I am," she confirmed, turning in his arms. "Very happy. I woke up today and realized that for the first time in my life, I'm not afraid of what the day will bring. Just hope." "Well," Miguel said, his eyes shining, "then perhaps this is a good time for this." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wooden box. Clara blinked, confused. Miguel opened it, revealing a simple silver ring with a small blue stone. "I know we're already married," he said a little awkwardly, "but it all happened so fast back then, out of necessity. I want to do it right. I want to give you something that signifies choice, not obligation. Clara, will you choose to be my wife? Not because you have to, but because you want to." Clara covered her mouth, her eyes welling up. "Miguel." "And before you answer," he continued quickly, "I want you to know that these last few months have been the happiest of my life. You brought light into this house. You brought laughter, warmth, purpose. I love you, Clara, completely, and I'll love you until my last breath." Clara couldn't trust her voice to respond, so she simply extended her hand, letting him slide the ring onto her finger. Then she kissed him, long, deep, filled with all the words she couldn't say. When they broke apart, both were smiling through tears. "I love you too," she finally managed, so much that sometimes it hurts how good it is. They spent the day working side by side, him out in the fields, her tending the garden, meeting for lunch, exchanging smiles and casual touches that meant more than 1,000 words. In the evening, sitting on the porch, Clara rested her head on Miguel's shoulder as they watched the sunset paint the sky in hues of rose and orange. "Remember that morning by the river?" she asked softly. "How could I forget? I was so scared, so sure I was going to die. And then you showed up and everything changed. It was like God looked down on me and said, 'Your time isn't up yet. There are still good things waiting.'" Miguel squeezed her hand. He was right. "He was," she agreed. "You know what Isabel told me the other day? She said the best stories are the ones where everything seems lost, but then something shifts, an act of courage, an unexpected kindness, and suddenly what looked like the end becomes the beginning. Is that true?" "I think so." Clara looked at him, her eyes shining in the golden twilight. "Because my life was an end. I was dying in that river, but I was also already dead for years before that. Dead inside, no hope, no future, and you didn't just save me from those gators. You saved me from a life without love, without belonging, without a home." "You saved me too," Miguel said, his voice rough, "from a loneliness that was slowly killing me, from a life that was just survival, without meaning." They fell silent for a long moment, simply present with each other, present in that perfect moment. Inside, the fire crackled. In the garden, the plants settled in for the night. In the fields, the wind whispered through the tall grass. And on that small farm on the edge of the world, two broken hearts had found healing in each other. Life wouldn't always be easy. There would be hard winters, bad harvests, days of weariness and doubt. But they would face them together, with the certainty that only comes when the soul finally finds its place. "Miguel?" Clara broke the silence. "Yeah. Thank you for saving me." "Thank you for letting me," he replied. And as the first stars began to prick the darkening sky, Clara understood something fundamental. Home isn't a place. Home is where someone waits for you with a lamp lit, where your stories are heard, where your fears are understood and your dreams nurtured. Home is where, even after the worst storms, you can finally rest and say, "I'm home. This is home now." And here, in Miguel's arms, under the infinite sky of a God who writes stories of redemption, Clara was finally home. What would you do in their place? Have you ever faced a situation where you had to choose between safety and defending what is right? Comment and share this story with someone who needs to remember that there is always hope, even when everything seems lost.